Russian military seems to have woefully underestimated the will and fighting ability of Ukrainian forces, who are fighting this invasion with a whole of society response. Sebastian Junger is an author, director, and Vanity Fair contributing editor. His latest piece is on whether Ukrainian fighters can stand up to the Russian military, and he joins me now. It's great to have you here. Obviously, you have reported war zones a lot.
Yeah.
And, I guess the general sense here is Russia has more troops, more artillery, they have more of everything. The Ukrainians are outmanned and outgunned. But as you write in the piece, that doesn't always determine the conclusion of a war.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I boiled the piece down from my book Freedom, which looks at how underdog groups defeat greater powers. Everything from wars, insurgencies, to the labor movement, to the civil rights movement. And what's extraordinary about humans is that we may be the only species where a smaller individual can defeat a larger individual. A smaller group can defeat a larger group. And history is riddled with these examples. Just to pick one, in Montenegro, in the early 1600s, the Ottoman Empire invaded with a force that was 15 times the size of what the Montenegrins could muster. And the Montenegrins were not cowed. They sent out 3-man groups all night long, attacked 12,000 Ottoman troops. They attacked them all night long, mounted a huge attack at dawn, and killed a third of the invaders and drove them off. It's exactly analogous to Russia invading Ukraine. And eventually the Ottomans occupied Montenegro, but they couldn't maintain it. As someone said, I quite like this, Putin might be able to eat Ukraine, but will not be able to digest it. The burdens of occupation are enormous. As we found out in in Afghanistan. We won the war in Afghanistan until we left. We couldn't bear the costs. And the costs, it's interesting, it scales up from individual combat quite well. When you have a small fighter in the ring fighting a larger fighter, big muscles are strong, but they burn through a huge amount of oxygen, right? So the large fighter, if he doesn't win quickly, might not win at all because he will get exhausted. And it's exactly the same for the military. Large militaries burn through a huge amount of fuel and ammunition and food, and they can't sustain it forever. Small insurgencies can, and they basically have to not lose, and eventually they win.
Yeah, you're right. This great paragraph here: from street corner fistfights to insurgencies and wars, size is a terrible predictor of the outcome of human conflict. We're unique among mammals in our ability to defeat a larger, more powerful opponent. The smaller group, the more stubbornly loyal members are to one another, and the harder and costlier they are to defeat. There's also, I have to say, there's been images littered everywhere of just dead Russian soldiers on the ground, and that to me says something about how this is going. That is not a sight, that I think you saw a ton of even in Iraq, where we would go and bring people back. We would make sure that they were buried. This says things have gone catastrophically wrong in any situation in which there are a bunch of Russian soldiers deceased and lying out on the ground.
Yeah, that means they don't control the battle space, right? The Americans always controlled the battle space. They would take casualties, but they controlled the space. And, another thing that might be at work there, but I have no idea, I haven't reported from there, but the loyalty between soldiers is incredibly powerful, particularly if they have experience together. And at least with the U.S. military, it's hard to imagine the guys I was with leaving anyone behind knowingly. And it may be that they were just conscripts that were thrown together at the last minute, really had no bonds within the units, and didn't feel like they needed to risk their lives to drag their dead comrades to safety. And so, I don't know, but it's an interesting sort of telltale sign about the state of morale.
Finally, one thing that I just keep coming back to, and your piece illustrates this, is that these outcomes aren't foreordained. They just aren't. History can hinge on surprising military victories, and the path of history of one way and another can be determined by them.
Well, let me just say that if smaller groups couldn't defeat larger ones, there would be no freedom in the world.
There certainly wouldn't be a United States, right?
No, we would have lost to Britain.
Yeah.
The Irish would have lost to Britain. The Taliban, would not have won. We would have defeated them. I loathe the Taliban regime. Right. But the fact that a group like that can defeat essentially an empire means that small groups can be autonomous and self-defining. The word freedom is derived from the German word for beloved. Freedom is one of the few things people will die for, basically because dying to protect freedom means dying to protect your family and your community.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of that on display. Sebastian Junger is a really fascinating piece. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, officials say Russian forces